Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. So I finally found it. My perfect Tokarev. And it's not a Tokarev. It's a Zastava M57, the Yugoslavian version of the Tokarev. Now, in the early part of this century, prior to World War II, 7.63 Mauser was a very popular cartridge in Russia, and they determined that they should develop their own handgun that was a little more inexpensive and efficiently packaged than the C96 Mauser. And they came up with the Tokarev, which was based on, among other things, the 1911 and similar pistols. But they made their own little changes to it to make it less expensive to produce, easier to maintain in the field, and they hotted up the cartridge considerably. You can fire 7.63 Mauser in a Tokarev, and it will probably work just fine. But if you run 7.62 Tokarev in your Mauser, you are liable to cause accelerated wear and maybe just flat out break it, because this is quite a bit hotter. Now, this is the 7.62 by 2.5 Tokarev, and while 7.63 Mauser typically shoots a 85 grain bullet at 1,200 to 1,300 feet per second, this typically shoots the same 85 grain bullet at 1,500 feet per second, and in submachine gun loads up to 1,640 feet per second. So it is a very hot cartridge. Now, despite that, since the bullet is so small, recoil is comparatively mild, and it has excellent penetration, which could be a big deal in a place like Russia, where people sometimes have to wear a shit ton of clothes to keep from freezing to death. So they came up with the Tokarev, which is a Browning-style locked breech, single-action semi-automatic pistol. And it was not carried with the hammer cocked and locked because there's no safety. Typically, it was supposed to be carried, and this varied depending on time and all the different countries that used this and variations of it. It was typically carried either with a loaded magazine and nothing in the chamber, or with a round chambered and the hammer in the safety notch, which was reasonably safe, but it was not drop safe by modern standards. So it has a magazine that in the Tokarev holds 8 rounds, and in the M57 with its longer grip holds 9 rounds. Now, why is this my perfect Tokarev? Well, for one thing, it does not have any manual safeties at all, period. Now, guns imported after the Gun Control Act of 1968 are supposed to have safeties. And when the Eastern Bloc opened up after the fall of the Soviet Union, they had a lot of guns they wanted to import, especially since they had moved on from the Tokarev, for the most part, to the Makarov or other guns. So they would bodge on some kind of crappy safety, often with terrible ergonomics, to import them to the United States, where they sold very cheaply. And I hated all of those safeties. Now, in recent years, they have started putting on a trigger dingus like a Glock to satisfy the requirement for a manual safety, and I started to get interested in those because, first of all, it's not that obtrusive, and second of all, you can swap the trigger out and get rid of it. And then I happened across this one. Now, I had determined that the Russian Makarov, or the Russian-style Makarovs, with their shorter grip, were okay, but they're suboptimal for me. The Zastava M57 has a longer grip with 1 additional round in the magazine, and that fits my hand very, very nicely. So I've been kind of on the lookout for a Zastava M57, and just had never gotten around to buying one. And then what to my wondering eyes should appear, but in the case at Pinto's, this one, which has no manual safeties, not even the trigger dingus. And it's the long grip. And that makes it kind of perfect for me. But more than that, it's in exceptionally good condition. I suspect it may have been re-arsenaled because it has the Hungarian marks on it, and it has a rack number inside the magazine well and on the side of the fire control unit. Yes, it has a removable fire control unit. It had a lot of really advanced ideas for its time, and it served the Russians quite well till after the end of World War II, when they decided they wanted something simpler and cheaper to manufacture and came up with the Makarov. And it's not just an interesting gun, it's actually a good gun. So before we get into the weeds too much further, I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon. It's very much a shoestring operation, and your contributions help more than you know. Also like to thank channel benefactors, those individuals and businesses who have contributed to the channel in innumerable ways and really helped make this work. And thanks, as always, to Rain City Shooting Center, calm down, editor, I got it this time, for providing material support to the channel. So, let's have a look at shooting this gun. So it shoots really well, and, you know, this was my first outing with it. You actually saw the first shots I ever fired through it. So I've hardly had time to get used to the gun. Now, I'm going to have to paint the sight orange because my accuracy, even at 7 yards, was somewhat handicapped by the fact that I could not see the front sight. Thank you, old eyes. You can see the rear sight is very, very tall, which does enable it to be used as an emergency cocking lever. And, you know, against the edge of a table, belt, equipment, ground, random small animals. But they're actually really not bad for military sights for a pre-World War II design. There is a U-notch rear. You know what? Let's go to the tabletop and have a closer look at that. So, the Zastava M57 is a full-size service pistol. It is 7.6 inches long, 5.25 inches high, maybe. That very, very tall rear sight adds to that significantly. And it weighs about 31 ounces, which is not bad for an all-steel service pistol. As you can see, it's quite slender, very svelte, really. And the grips remove like a Tokarev, which means you have to reach inside and push a lever, a little spring thing that's hinged on the center of the star, upwards until it unlocks. Then this grip panel comes off, and you can just flip it over and do the same on the other side to remove the grip panels, which is really clever. There's no screws to lose. There's nothing really complicated about it except using a screwdriver, a point of a knife, something to reach in there and get it. The magazine well, of course, is not beveled. And these guns, by the way, were used by the Yugoslavians until even into the 1990s, although they were being replaced at that time. And in operation, it is straight up typical Browning. Cock it back, just like a Browning. Hammer remains cocked, no safeties. Takedown is a little different because you've got this clip here holding it. And the reason for this is so that it was much easier to machine for it to work this way. And you can pull this aside. Sometimes that takes the use of a cartridge room or something, but this one's pretty easy. You pop that out, pop out the slide stop, and the slide just comes right off. Now this is interesting because this is actually a hinged guide rod. So to remove it, you push it forward, and it bends in the middle so that it can be removed, in theory. There we go. Okay, it has that joint so it can wiggle, and it is a fully captured recoil system, which is really, really nice and kind of an advanced feature for its time. Then you can rotate this until you can remove it, the bushing, and then the barrel comes out the front, just like a, okay, I thought it came out the front just like a 1911. I mean, it's not like I haven't had one of these apart before, or a Tokarev. And the barrel is very much Browning with the two locking lugs, except in this case, for economy, they just didn't bother taking them away off the sides or grinding it. And the chamber is fully supported, which is important in such a high-pressure cartridge. And the bottleneck cartridge actually feeds really well and really easily, which increases the reliability. Now, you can see on the side here is the rack number, which is also repeated here on the inside. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. On the inside of the grip frame. And removal of this is rather easier than the fire control unit on a SIG. You pick it up and pull it out. Inside, you can see the mainspring right there, which does not leave or go anywhere. And it's all very, very good for field maintenance, and really it's a very elegant and very good design. I think I would like to see that on something more modern than this. And this top of the fire control unit also acts as the ejector. Well, this part of it does. So really neat and really nicely done. This one is very well made. The machining is really good. It's a little dirty now because I was shooting it, and the ammo I was shooting was not clean. It was surplus ammo. But you can see it's pretty nicely machined and finished. It's certainly better than a wartime production Tokarev, but it's actually better than most of the non-wartime production Tokarevs I have seen from Russia. And these were used by Yugoslavia and then Serbia, once Serbia became a thing. So, reinsert the guide rod, push it forward until you can bend it down to go where it goes. Just have to make sure you have that rotated correctly. And then reassembly is like pretty much any other Browning-based pistol. Slide it on. Once it's on, you push in the slide stop. There you go. And it goes all the way in. There's no need for a cutout or anything. And then you just push the clip back in place. I guess I haven't got it all the way in. Okay, if we lock the slide back, then you can just push it and the clip locks it right in place. And from there it operates normally. The sights are pretty good for a pre-war design. Front sight is has a nice sharp edge and is serrated. It is dovetailed into place in a tiny little dovetail. And the rear sight, of course, is quite tall. It has a half-notch U that is smaller than modern preferences would have you use. But overall, the sight picture is pretty good for what it is. The trigger is not great. There's a lot of take-up. And then there's creep before it fires, but there's no real over travel. Reset is neither tactile nor audible. And It's not particularly short for a single action auto, but it's kind of hard to tell where it is because there are very few clues. These serrations are very well cut and nice and sharp. And you can see here, this was an official pistol because there's the Hungarian, I believe, Hungarian mark. And then you have serrations along here, so to reduce glare off the front when you're aiming. And overall, you know, it's a good service pistol, and I quite like it, and I enjoy shooting it. Now, the trigger is not that great, and by the way, it breaks at 6.5 pounds, according to the handy-dandy Lyman trigger gauge. Now, there is a lanyard loop here, lanyard loops on the bottom of the magazines. The magazines don't drop free for no particular good reason. They're just kind of, they just don't drop out, even though they're not held in or stuck in. There is okay, maybe they are. There's a little bit of pull to get it out, which, you know, is not tragic on a military sidearm, and not actually that surprising for a sidearm designed for World War II. So, spare magazine came with it. This is the original magazine, actually. This one almost drops free, so it may be just a thing of the aftermarket magazine. Although it does appear to be an official magazine, not a triple K or something. So overall, I really like it, and the trigger is surprisingly easy to live with when firing it. And it has a very long, slender, elegant look. And again, at 30 to 31 ounces, it's really not heavy. And but it's got enough weight, and it's very nice to shoot. Mention in the tabletop, by the way, that the design with the rounding of the back and the round hammer makes it really easy to thumb cock if your finger is pressing against the front of the trigger guard. I have a little more trouble with it from the safe position, but keeping your finger in the safe position wasn't that much of a thing before World War II. So this is a really, really pretty example, and it is in fantastic shape. Like I said, I think it was unfired before I fired it today. And it is literally everything I was looking for in a Tokarev. The long, as mentioned, a couple times probably, the long grip, 1 round added capacity doesn't hurt, and it does not have the horrible manual safeties that got tacked onto so many of these. So I was very pleased to find it, and it was really quite attractively priced. It came in as part of an estate, and I spotted it in the case at Pinto's and thought I must have that because that's exactly what I've been looking for in a Tokarev. So, very pleased, and I do reload 7.62 by 25 Tokarev, so I will be reloading some of that. I'm also maybe play with some hollow points because I have found that my 308 resizing die will very nicely resize .312 diameter bullets right down to .308, and they work great in my M1 carbine. I also have some Lehigh bullets, enhanced cavitation bullets, designed for .30 carbine, and I'm going to load some of them up and shoot them out of this and maybe do some gel tests, because I think that could be pretty cool. There are some accessories for these. There is not a lot of aftermarket, but there is a more modern ergonomic rubber grip that you can mount on these. And basically you just remove these grips and force fit it on, and it just stays in place by friction and suction. Might look into that. But since my interest in this gun is primarily as a historic piece, maybe, maybe not. Now, if I am not careful, it does chew on me just a tiny bit It didn't draw blood or anything, but when I wasn't minding my P's and Q's, it would bite me a little bit. So the only modification I'm really contemplating is breaking an edge right here so that it's not quite so grabby. But I don't think that will affect the overall aesthetic of the pistol, and it might save me a little abuse down the road. So I am a happy camper because I finally found the perfect Tokarev for me. Anyway, so that's it. I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you again real soon.